The call reached the Alderwood Police Department just after midnight, when the city was quiet enough for every sound to feel louder than it should. The janitor who made the call was shaking so badly that the dispatcher had to ask him to repeat himself 3 times. He kept saying the same sentence, over and over, as if stuck in a loop. "There's a man in the room. He won't wake up. The door was locked." At first, it sounded like another late-night medical emergency. The Alderwood Hotel was old, the kind of place where travelers passed through without leaving memories behind. Heart attacks happened. Overdoses happened. People died quietly in hotel rooms more often than anyone liked to admit. The responding officers expected routine paperwork and a long night. They were wrong. When the first patrol car pulled up, the hotel's front lights glowed weakly against the fog that clung to the street. Inside, the lobby smelled of old carpet and cleaning chemicals. The night clerk sat behind the desk, pale and silent, his eyes fixed on the elevator doors as if something might come out of them. Room 312 was on the 3rd floor, at the very end of the hallway. The janitor stood nearby, hands clasped together, whispering to himself. He explained that he had gone up to clean the floor after a guest complained about noise earlier that evening. When he knocked on the door of room 312 to announce housekeeping, there was no answer. He used the master key, but it wouldn't open. That was when he noticed the deadbolt was turned from the inside. Hotel policy required him to call security. Security forced the door open, and that was when they saw the man. The officers entered slowly, their shoes sinking into the thick carpet. The room was perfectly neat. The bed was made except for the top cover, which had been folded back carefully. The man lay in the center of the mattress, hands resting on his chest, legs straight, as if someone had positioned him there with intention. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Clean-shaven, dark hair combed neatly to the side. He wore a pressed shirt and dark trousers, the kind someone might wear to a business meeting. His shoes were lined up near the bed, toes pointing outward. There was no sign of panic on his face. No fear, just a frozen expression of surprise, as though he had realized something important 1 second too late. The room was silent in a way that felt unnatural. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed muted. The officers checked for a pulse. Nothing. They checked for wounds. There were none. No blood. No bruises. No marks on the neck. No overturned furniture. Nothing broken. Nothing disturbed. The door was still locked from the inside. When the crime scene unit arrived, the questions multiplied. The windows were sealed and hadn't been opened in years. The ventilation system showed no signs of tampering. The smoke detector was intact. There was no indication of poison, gas, or fire. The man had simply died. But the strangest discovery was yet to come. A forensic technician began dusting the door handle for fingerprints. She frowned and tried again. Then she moved to the light switch. Nothing appeared. She tested the glass on the nightstand, the telephone, the TV remote, even the edge of the table where a person would naturally rest their hand. There were no fingerprints. Not faint ones. Not smudged ones. None at all. At first, they thought it was a mistake. The technician changed brushes, changed powder, and tested her equipment on her own kit to make sure it was working. It was. Perfectly. They tried again. Still nothing. The room was clean, but not overly so. It didn't look freshly scrubbed. Dust rested lightly on the lampshade. The carpet showed faint footprints from staff who had entered after the door was forced open. But everything else looked untouched. Even more unsettling was the discovery that the victim himself had no readable fingerprints. When they tried to take prints from his hands, the ridges were faint, almost smooth, like they had been worn away over time. The lead investigator on scene felt a chill crawl up his spine. In all his years, he had never seen anything like it. They searched the man's pockets carefully. No wallet, no phone, no credit cards, no hotel key. Nothing that could identify him. Only one item was found. A small silver key. It was cold to the touch, plain and unmarked, with no brand name, no number, no tag. It didn't match the hotel's locks or any nearby doors. No one recognized it. The hotel manager was brought in for questioning. She insisted the man had checked in earlier that evening, paid in cash, and given a name that now appeared to be fake. She couldn't remember his face clearly, only that he was polite and quiet. He asked specifically for a room on a higher floor and declined housekeeping service. She also admitted something she hadn't told the officers at first. Room 312 had a history. Guests complained about that room more than any other. Some said they couldn't sleep. Others said they felt dizzy or disoriented after spending time inside. One woman had checked out after only an hour, claiming she felt like she was being watched even when she was alone. Another guest reported that his hands felt numb after touching the walls. The hotel had no explanation. Maintenance found nothing wrong. Eventually, management stopped assigning the room unless the hotel was full. That night, it had been full. As the body was taken away, the hallway lights flickered briefly. One of the officers laughed nervously and blamed the wiring. But no one missed the way the temperature in the hallway seemed to drop. Later, when the medical examiner conducted a preliminary review, the confusion deepened. The man's heart showed no sign of disease. His organs were healthy. Toxicology tests would take time, but there was no immediate evidence of drugs or poison. The only unusual detail was mild oxygen deprivation, not enough to clearly indicate suffocation. It was as if his body had simply stopped. By morning, the news had spread quietly through the department. A dead man in a locked hotel room. No fingerprints anywhere. No identity. No clear cause of death. Some officers joked to break the tension. Others avoided the topic entirely. But one detective, assigned to review the case files later that day, stared at the photographs longer than he should have. He noticed details others had missed. The way the man's hands rested too neatly. The careful placement of the shoes. The unnatural stillness of the room. This wasn't a random death. It wasn't an accident. Whatever had happened inside room 312 had been controlled, deliberate, and precise. And the room itself was hiding something. As the hotel reopened later that afternoon, guests walked past room 312 without knowing what had occurred inside its walls. The door was sealed with tape, the number plate removed. To everyone else, it was just another closed room in an old building. But behind that locked door, something had begun. Something that would not stay hidden for long. And somewhere in the city, someone still had a matching key. By the time morning light reached the windows of the Alderwood Police Department, the mystery of room 312 had already begun to unsettle everyone who touched it. The body from the hotel was now sealed inside a white evidence bag, resting in the cold stillness of the morgue. But the questions it carried were louder than ever. Who was the man? And how could someone exist without leaving even the smallest trace behind? Detective Aaron Cole arrived early, coffee untouched in his hand. He had been awake most of the night, reading the initial reports sent from the crime scene. The lack of fingerprints alone was enough to make the case unusual, but the absence of identity disturbed him on a deeper level. People always left something behind. A name. A record. A mistake. This man had left nothing. Cole studied the photographs spread across the table. The man's face was calm, almost peaceful, yet something about his expression suggested sudden awareness, as if he had realized too late that he had walked into a trap. Cole noticed the careful order of the room again. The shoes aligned, the bed folded back with precision. That kind of detail rarely happened by chance. The first step was identification. Officers sent the man's photograph to every missing persons unit in the state. They checked recent hospital admissions, shelters, border crossings, and arrest records. Nothing matched. No one had reported a missing man with that face. Not yesterday. Not last week. Not in the past year. The dental records offered no help. His teeth were in good condition, with no unique work that could be traced to a specific dentist. The serial numbers on his clothing had been removed, cut cleanly as if done deliberately. Even the fabric tags were missing. When the DNA results came back, they deepened the mystery instead of solving it. There were no matches in criminal databases, no partial hits, no distant relatives. It was as though the man had never been born, or had somehow slipped through every system designed to track human existence. Cole stood in the morgue as the medical examiner continued the autopsy. The body showed no external injuries. Internally, everything appeared normal. The heart was healthy. The brain showed no trauma. There were no signs of disease or infection. Toxicology tests were still pending, but early indicators suggested nothing unusual. The lungs told a different story. They showed mild signs of oxygen deprivation, subtle enough to be easily dismissed, yet clear enough to raise concern. Not the damage of strangulation. Not the flooding seen in drowning. Something quieter. Something slower. The medical examiner leaned back and removed her gloves. She shook her head slightly. If I didn't know better, she said, I'd say he ran out of air without anything blocking his breathing. Cole felt a tightness in his chest. Air didn't just dissipate. Back at the station, Cole reviewed the hotel surveillance footage frame by frame. The man entered the lobby at 9:17 p.m., walking alone. He didn't look nervous. He didn't rush. He nodded politely at the desk clerk, signed the register, and accepted the room key. He carried no luggage, no bag, nothing that suggested he planned to stay long. The cameras followed him into the elevator. He pressed a button for the third floor. The doors closed. When they opened again, he stepped out, adjusted his jacket, and walked down the hallway toward room 312. That was the last time he was seen alive. No one entered the hallway after him. No staff. No guests. The floor remained empty until the janitor arrived hours later. The timeline was airtight, except for one moment. At exactly 11:46 p.m., the hallway camera flickered. The image froze for 4 seconds, then resumed. To most people, it looked like a simple technical glitch. But Cole noticed something odd. Before the glitch, the hallway light near room 312 was on. After the glitch, it was off. No one had been there to turn it off. Cole visited the hotel himself that afternoon. The manager walked him through the building, apologizing repeatedly, her voice tight with nerves. When they reached the third floor, the air felt heavier, warmer, and oddly stale. Cole dismissed it as imagination, but the feeling didn't go away. Room 312 stood at the end of the hallway, sealed with police tape. The door looked ordinary, scratched and faded like the others. There was nothing about it that warned people to stay away. Cole asked to see the guest register. The name used by the victim was Daniel Frost. The address was incomplete. The phone number didn't exist. Payment had been made in cash. Exact amount. No tip. The manager hesitated, then admitted something she had avoided telling the patrol officers. People complained about that room. Guests said they felt dizzy. Some said they had trouble breathing. Others claimed they couldn't remember how long they had been inside. One man had called the front desk in a panic, saying the room felt smaller every minute he stayed in it. When staff checked later, he was gone, leaving the door wide open. Maintenance inspections never found anything wrong. The room passed every safety test. Over time, the complaints were quietly ignored. Cole asked for past incident reports related to room 312. The manager said there were none on file. But when Cole pressed further, she admitted older records might have been removed years ago, before she took over. That night, Cole couldn't sleep. The image of the man on the bed kept returning to him. He dreamed of standing in a room with no windows, pressing his hands against the walls, feeling the air grow thinner with every breath. The next morning, the toxicology results arrived. They were clean. No drugs. No poison. No chemicals. Nothing that explained the death. By now, rumors had begun to spread within the department. Some officers joked about ghost rooms and cursed hotels. Others suggested an elaborate suicide, though no method could be identified. Cole ignored the noise. He focused on facts. The man had entered the room alone. The door had locked behind him. Something inside that room had taken his life without leaving a trace. Cole requested older city property records for the hotel. Buried among renovation permits and ownership transfers, he found something unusual. Decades earlier, the third floor had undergone extensive structural modifications, far more than a normal hotel remodel required. The details were vague, and several pages were missing. One word appeared repeatedly in the margins, typed and crossed out again and again. Containment. Cole didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew it mattered. As he closed the file, his phone rang. Another officer was on the line, his voice tense. "Detective," he said, "you need to come down to evidence." When Cole arrived, he was shown something that made his stomach drop. The silver key found in the victim's pocket had been tested against hundreds of locks across the department. It didn't match any of them. But under magnification, the metal showed signs of repeated use, worn smooth by human hands. Hands that, like the man in room 312, had left no fingerprints behind. For the first time since taking the case, Cole felt certain of one thing. The man in the hotel had not been the first, and he would not be the last. Detective Aaron Cole stood alone in the hallway outside room 312 long after the rest of the team had left. The hotel was quiet again, pretending nothing had happened. but the silence felt thin, like a sheet stretched over something rotten. The door to the room remained sealed with tape, the number plate removed, as if erasing the label might erase the memory of what had been found inside. Cole couldn't explain why he felt drawn back here. He had worked hundreds of death scenes over the years, many of them far worse than this. Yet this room stayed with him in a way he couldn't shake. It felt unfinished, like a sentence that stopped halfway through. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room looked smaller in daylight. Sunlight filtered weakly through the narrow window, stopping short of the bed as if it didn't want to enter fully. The air was still, heavy, and strangely dull, like a room that absorbed sound instead of reflecting it. Even Cole's footsteps seemed muted. For a moment, he simply stood there, taking it in. The bed had been stripped, the body long removed, but the shape of the man's presence lingered in his mind. Cole imagined him lying there, eyes open, waiting for something that never came. He walked slowly around the room, letting instinct guide him. Years of investigations had taught him that answers often hid in places logic ignored. He touched the desk, the chair, the nightstand. Every surface felt dry, almost chalky, like it resisted being touched. When he pressed his palm against the wall behind the bed, he felt it. A faint hollow sound. Cole froze. He pressed again, harder this time. The sound was subtle, but it was there. The wall didn't respond like the others. It sounded thinner, emptier. He called for a building inspector. 2 hours later, a small team returned with equipment. The hotel manager protested weakly, worried about damage and liability. But Cole didn't back down. Whatever had killed the man in this room wasn't finished revealing itself. The inspector tapped along the wall methodically. When he reached the area behind the bed, he paused. He tapped again, slower, then nodded. "There's a void back here," he said. "Narrow, but deep enough to matter." They removed the bed completely and began cutting into the wall. Dust filled the air, and the sound of tearing plaster echoed down the hallway. When the panel finally came loose, everyone fell silent. Behind the wall was a hidden chamber. It was no wider than a closet and just tall enough for a person to stand upright. The space was sealed on all sides, its interior lined with the same strange, dull material as the main room. The air inside was stale and cold, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. Cole stepped closer and felt a sudden pressure in his ears. "There's no ventilation," the inspector said quietly. "At least none that I can see." A flashlight beam swept across the narrow walls, and that was when they saw the markings. Dozens of scratches covered the surface, running vertically and horizontally in chaotic patterns. Some were deep, carved with force. Others were faint, barely visible, like someone had lost the strength to press harder. The marks overlapped, layered on top of each other, as if many hands had made them over time. At the bottom of the far wall, a sentence had been carved into the surface. "You leave nothing behind." No one spoke for a long moment. Cole felt a chill crawl up his arms. This wasn't vandalism. This wasn't random damage. It was a message. Crime scene technicians moved in, documenting everything. As before, they found no fingerprints. Not inside the hidden chamber. Not on the cut wall. Not even on the fresh edges where tools had just worked. It was as if the room rejected all evidence of touch. Cole requested old architectural plans for the hotel. The original blueprints showed no such chamber. According to the documents, the wall behind the bed should have been solid. Yet here it was, hiding a space that had never officially existed. That evening, Cole sat in his office surrounded by stacks of paper. Property records, renovation permits, ownership transfers. The Alderwood Hotel had changed hands several times over the decades, often quietly, often through shell companies. One name appeared repeatedly in older documents, always briefly, always followed by redactions. A private research contractor. Most of the files connected to that period were missing, but one survived by accident, misfiled under a different address. It described temporary structural modifications to several rooms on the 3rd floor. The purpose was blacked out, but the timeline matched. Cole leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. A hidden chamber behind a hotel wall was not something built by accident. Someone had designed it. Someone had paid for it. And someone had decided it should never be found. That night, Cole returned to the hotel alone. He told himself he was just double-checking measurements, but deep down he knew he needed to feel the space again. He stood inside the main room, lights off, Door closed. The darkness felt heavier than it should have. He imagined what it would be like to stand inside the hidden chamber. No windows. No sound. Barely enough air. Time would stretch. Thoughts would turn inward, looping, folding in on themselves. He checked his watch. 1 minute passed. Then another. The room seemed to press closer. Cole opened the door and stepped into the hallway, breathing deeply. His heart was racing. He laughed quietly at himself, embarrassed by the reaction. Still, he didn't go back inside. The following day brought new information. A retired city engineer agreed to meet with Cole after hearing about the case through unofficial channels. The man was nervous, constantly checking the door of the diner where they sat today. "I worked on a project like that once," the engineer said, lowering his voice. "Not here, but something similar." He explained that decades ago, certain rooms had been designed for psychological testing, sensory deprivation, isolation, controlled environments. The goal was to study how long a person could remain alone without external stimuli before their mind began to fracture. They wanted rooms that left no trace, the engineer said. No fingerprints. No fibers. Nothing that could prove someone had been inside. Cole asked why. The engineer shook his head. Officially, it was about national security, training, resilience. Unofficially, it was about seeing how much a person could endure before they broke. The program ended abruptly, the engineer said. Too many subjects suffered permanent damage. Some died. Records were sealed. Rooms were dismantled or sold off as ordinary spaces. Some things slipped through, he added. Rooms that were easier to hide than destroy. That afternoon, Cole received another call from forensics. They had analyzed the material lining the hidden chamber. It wasn't soundproofing. It wasn't insulation. It was a composite designed to absorb oils, moisture, and even microscopic skin particles. It was built to erase human presence. The realization hit Cole hard. The man in room 312 hadn't been killed by a weapon. He had been placed in an environment designed to strip him of evidence, identity, and eventually life. But one question remained. Why now? The answer came sooner than expected. Late that night, Cole was called back to the hotel. A guest staying 2 rooms down from 312 had reported strange sounds. Not voices. Not footsteps. Just breathing. Slow and uneven, coming from inside the walls. Maintenance checked the room. They found nothing. But when Cole pressed his ear against the wall behind the bed in the neighboring room, he heard it too. A faint, rhythmic sound, like air being pulled through a narrow space. The hidden chamber wasn't empty. They opened the wall again, faster this time, ripping through plaster and wood. When the panel came loose, the chamber was revealed. It was empty. No person. No movement. Just fresh scratches on the wall, deeper than the others, cutting through the surface as if made in desperation. At the bottom, beneath the old message, a new sentence had been carved. It's not over. Cole stepped back, his mind racing. Someone had been inside that chamber recently. Someone had survived long enough to leave a warning. As the team sealed the room again, Cole realized something that made his blood run cold. The man who died in room 312 hadn't been trapped there by accident. He had been brought back, and whoever held the keys to these rooms was still out there, unlocking doors that were never meant to be opened again. The second body was found 3 nights later, just before dawn, in a part of the city most people forgot existed. The building was a converted storage complex near the old industrial district, now divided into small rental units and offices no one stayed in for long. A security guard on his morning rounds noticed one unit's light still on and decided to check it. When he opened the door, the smell of cold, stale air rushed past him, followed by a silence so complete it made his ears ring. The man lay on the floor near the center of the room, his body positioned almost carefully, as if someone had thought about where he should fall. His eyes were open, his face frozen in the same quiet shock Detective Cole had seen before. There were no wounds, no blood, no overturned furniture. The door had been locked from the inside. And once again, there were no fingerprints. When Cole arrived at the scene, he already knew what he would find. The silver key was tucked neatly into the man's jacket pocket, identical to the one recovered from room 312. Cole held it in his gloved hand, feeling the same smooth metal, worn by use yet refusing to show signs of it. The pattern was no longer a theory. It was real. The second victim was older, in his late 50s, with graying hair and rougher hands. Unlike the first man, this one had faint calluses, the kind earned through years of technical work. Still, his fingerprints were barely readable, like they had been slowly erased over time. The medical examiner's early assessment echoed the first case almost word for word. Healthy organs. No toxins. Mild oxygen deprivation that made no sense in an open room. Cole stood back and closed his eyes. Someone was recreating something. Not just killing, but repeating a process with care and precision. As the investigation widened, connections began to surface. Property records showed the storage complex had once belonged to the same private research contractor linked to the Alderwood Hotel decades earlier. The ownership trail was hidden behind shell companies and legal transfers, but the timeline matched too perfectly to ignore. Both buildings had been part of something larger, something scattered across the city and then quietly buried. Cole gathered his team and laid everything out. 2 deaths. 2 locations. 1 key. Both sites once tied to a long-abandoned research project. The question was no longer how these men died. It was why they were being chosen now. The answer came from an unexpected place. A journalist contacted the department, claiming to have information about an old government-backed program known informally as the Containment Initiative. The name matched the word Cole had seen crossed out in the hotel records. After some hesitation, the journalist agreed to meet. They sat in a parked car on a side street, rain tapping lightly against the windshield. The journalist handed Cole a folder filled with copied documents, many of them incomplete, others barely legible. The files described experiments designed to test the limits of human isolation, focusing on environments that could remove all physical evidence of a person's presence. The rooms were designed to absorb sound, oils, fibers, and even heat signatures. The goal, according to the notes, was to create spaces where people could enter and leave without proof they had ever been there. Most of the files focused on engineering details, wall compositions, flow restrictions, psychological observations. Names were rare, but some appeared in early drafts before being blacked out. Cole recognized one of them immediately. The name belonged to the second victim. As Cole read further, the shape of the truth began to form. The men who were dying were not random. They were not test subjects. They were architects of the system. Engineers, supervisors, behavioral specialists. People who had helped design the rooms, then walked away when the project collapsed. The initiative had officially ended after internal reports showed extreme psychological damage among participants. Memory loss, identity fragmentation, panic episodes that never fully faded. Several deaths were recorded as medical failures, quietly settled and sealed. Those responsible had moved on. Until now. Cole returned to his office and stared at the board where photos of the victims were pinned. 2 faces, connected by invisible lines. He added names from the old files, cross-checking them with employment records and retirement data. The list wasn't long. There were 5 people still alive. That night, Cole went home late, his mind racing. He dreamed of standing in a narrow room, scratching at the walls while voices whispered instructions he couldn't hear clearly. When he woke, his hands were clenched so tightly his nails had left marks in his palms. The third location was discovered before they could warn anyone. An abandoned medical research wing on the outskirts of the city, sealed for years. A homeless man reported hearing noises inside, slow breathing echoing through empty corridors. Police arrived to investigate and found a man sitting upright against the wall in a former examination room. He was alive when they found him, but barely. His eyes darted wildly as officers approached. His breathing was shallow and uneven. He tried to speak, but only fragments came out. Words without order. Sentences that collapsed halfway through. He was rushed to the hospital under guard. Cole arrived just as doctors stabilized him. The man's fingerprints were nearly gone, his skin dry and pale, as if it had been exposed to something that stripped it of moisture. He clutched a silver key in his hand so tightly they had to pry his fingers open. Before losing consciousness, he whispered one sentence. "It makes you forget yourself." The survivor had been a senior researcher in the Containment Initiative. Unlike the others, he had tried to shut the project down when he realized what it was doing to people. His objections were ignored. His warnings buried. After the program ended, he disappeared from public life. Someone had found him. Over the next 2 days, Cole learned more from hospital interviews than he ever wanted to know. The rooms were never meant to kill quickly. They were designed to dissolve a person's sense of self. Time lost meaning. Touch felt unreal. Breathing became something you had to remember to do. Panic didn't come suddenly. It crept in slowly, quietly, until it filled every thought. The survivor believed someone was reopening the rooms, one by one, forcing the architects to experience what they had created. Justice, he whispered. Or revenge. I can't tell anymore. Cole asked the question that had been burning in his mind. How did they choose who died and who lived? The man looked at him with exhausted eyes. They let the room decide. That answer haunted Cole. It suggested something worse than murder. It suggested surrendering control to an environment designed to destroy. As officers tracked down the remaining names on the list, they found empty houses, disconnected phones, hastily abandoned lives. The person behind this was moving faster now, tightening the pattern, closing in. Cole noticed something else as the map of locations filled in. The rooms weren't random. They formed a rough circle around the city, each one a remnant of the old project. And at the center of that circle was one place, the Alderwood Hotel. Cole felt a slow, sinking realization settle in his chest. The first death hadn't been a beginning. It had been a message. Someone was drawing the past back to its origin, step by step, key by key. And when the circle closed, whatever remained would be forced to face the room that started it all. As night fell, Cole stood in his office, staring at the case files spread before him. The city outside continued as normal, unaware that forgotten rooms were waking up, doors unlocking, and air growing thin behind walls no one thought to question. The pattern was complete now, and there was only one chapter left to play out. The final night began without sirens, without warning, and without the chaos that usually followed a major break in a case. Detective Aaron Cole sat alone in his office long after the rest of the department had gone quiet, staring at the map pinned to the board. Circles marked the locations of every room they had uncovered, every place where the past had resurfaced and claimed a life. The shape was unmistakable now. All paths led back to the Alderwood Hotel. Room 312. Cole felt a weight settle over him, heavy and familiar. This case had followed him too closely from the beginning, tugging at memories he had spent decades convincing himself were harmless. He told himself that was coincidence. He told himself the room meant nothing to him personally. But the truth had been waiting patiently. He stood and locked his office door, then reached into his coat pocket. The silver key rested there, cold against his palm. He hadn't checked it into evidence. He hadn't logged it. He hadn't told anyone he had taken it. The same smooth metal. The same worn edges. The last key. Cole drove through empty streets toward the hotel, headlights cutting through the darkness. He parked in the same spot as before, stepped inside, and nodded to the night clock. The clock didn't recognize him. No one ever did when he didn't want them to. The elevator ride felt longer this time. The hum of the cables sounded distant, muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. When the doors opened on the third floor, the hallway lights flickered once, then steadied. Room 312 stood at the end, unmarked, waiting. Cole walked slowly, every step echoing in his chest. He stopped in front of the door and stayed at it longer than he meant to. He remembered standing outside a door just like this one decades ago, young and uncertain, clipboard in hand, listening to the muffled breathing of someone inside. He slid the key into the lock. It turned easily. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the room looked unchanged. The bed was neatly made again, fresh linens pulled tight. The air felt thick immediately, pressing against his skin. Cole closed the door behind him and engaged the deadbolt, the soft click sounding louder than it should have. He stood there for a moment, eyes closed, breathing slowly. He had told himself this was necessary, that understanding the room meant confronting it fully, that the dead deserved nothing less. The hidden chamber waited behind the wall, unseen but unmistakable. Cole crossed the room and pressed his hand against the familiar spot. The hollow echo answered him. He removed the panel he had ordered loosely resealed days earlier. The opening revealed the narrow space beyond. It looked smaller than he remembered, darker, as if it had grown more confined with time. Cole stepped inside and pulled the panel shut behind him. The darkness was immediate and complete. No sound from outside reached him. Even his own breathing seemed swallowed by the walls. He raised his hands instinctively, brushing them against the surface. The material felt dry and resistant refusing to hold his touch. Minutes passed. At first, nothing happened. Cole focused on his breathing, counting silently. He told himself he was in control. He had studied the reports. He knew what the room was designed to do. But knowledge did not stop the effects. The air began to feel thinner, not because it lacked oxygen, but because it offered no reassurance. Each breath felt deliberate, something he had to choose to take. Time lost its edges. His thoughts slowed, stretched, then folded in on themselves. Memories surfaced without warning. He remembered the project briefing, the excitement in the room as engineers discussed innovation and possibility. He remembered standing at the edge, not important enough to make decisions, not brave enough to challenge them. He remembered hearing screams once, late at night, and telling himself it was just stress, just imagination. The room pressed closer. Cole's heart raced, then slowed. Panic tried to rise, but it came softly, almost politely. The room didn't attack. It waited. It let the mind turn inward until there was nowhere else to go. He thought of the men who had died, men who had designed this place and never truly faced it. He thought of the one survivor, broken but alive, whispering that the room made you forget yourself. Cole felt it happening. His name felt distant, his badge number meaningless. His sense of time dissolved into a continuous now that refused to move forward. He didn't know how long he stood there before the sound came. Footsteps. They were faint at first, barely more than vibrations through the wall. Then the sound of the panel shifting. Light spilled into the chamber, sharp and blinding. Hands reached in and pulled him out. Cole collapsed onto the carpet, gasping, lungs burning as if he had surfaced from deep water. He rolled onto his side, coughing, trying to anchor himself to the world. Shapes hovered above him, voices overlapping. When his vision cleared, he saw familiar faces. Officers from his own department. Internal Affairs. The chief. The silver key lay on the floor beside him. The truth came out quickly after that. There was no dramatic denial. No attempt to run. Cole was too tired, too hollowed out for lies. He told them everything. He had been part of the containment initiative in its earliest days, a junior technician assigned to observation and maintenance. He hadn't designed the rooms, but he had helped keep them running. He had watched people enter and leave changed. He had filed reports that were never read. He had stayed quiet when the program collapsed, accepting a promotion and a new path. Years later, when he learned the room still existed, he began to feel something he hadn't expected. Responsibility. The keys had resurfaced after the death of a former supervisor, found among old belongings sold at auction. Cole had bought them anonymously, recognizing them immediately. He told himself he would turn them in. He told himself he would destroy the rooms. Instead, he started visiting the names on the old list. At first, he only wanted to talk, to hear how they remembered the project. Most of them minimized it. Just research. Just unfortunate outcomes. Necessary sacrifices. Something inside Cole broke. He decided the rooms should speak for themselves. He didn't kill anyone directly. He locked the doors and let the rooms do what they were designed to do. He believed that was justice. That was truth. As Cole sat in the interrogation room later that night, wrapped in a blanket, he admitted something else. He hadn't planned to survive. "I didn't deserve to," he said quietly. "None of us did." The medical examiner later confirmed what everyone already suspected. Cole would have died in the chamber if they hadn't arrived when they did. The room had been stripping him down, breath by breath, thought by thought. But the case didn't end with his arrest. In the weeks that followed, teams were sent to locate and dismantle every remaining containment room tied to the project. Some were found behind walls, others beneath floors. A few had already been destroyed unknowingly during renovations. Not all of them. One room, listed in the old records, was never located. Its address had been redacted beyond recovery. Its key was never recovered. When asked about it, Cole said nothing. He stared at the table, eyes unfocused, as if listening to something far away. The Alderwood Hotel closed permanently. Room 312 was sealed behind concrete, its walls filled in until no hollow spaces remained. The building was sold, renovated, renamed. Guests still complained sometimes. About dizziness. About panic. About rooms that felt smaller than they should. Experts dismissed it. The official report labeled the case resolved. A rogue investigator. A tragic attempt at personal justice. A closed chapter. But late one night, months after the arrests, a security camera in a different city glitched for 4 seconds. When the image returned, a hallway light was off. And somewhere, in a room that absorbed all trace of human presence, a door clicked shut from the inside, leaving nothing behind.